was still not really understood. That means we had One Health through a lens from one sector, very often the human sector. And we have learned to work together really very well. We meet once a week. But we still also realize that outside our own bubble or our own organizations, there's still a lot of questions about what is One Health. Everybody speaks about this. And we also know that each sector has its own work to do, but One Health is the interface between all of them. That's why you see that this research agenda is focusing on One Health. The second one is that we have seen when we were implementing programs and projects that we have questions that we had no answers for. So we usually use sort of best guess approach to advance, but the questions didn't get an answer while implementing some of the programs because the questions were just open. So that was, I think, the beginning of the idea that we should work on priorities on the research where we really focus on this interface. And the third point that I wanted to highlight is that we also realize, all of us, and I see many countries and all the regions represented, that we usually have more research in the richer countries. That doesn't mean that we have more problems or less problems in either part of the world, but the main focus and results that we get are not from low and middle income countries. So we really wanted to focus on questions that might be relevant for them. And that was one of the reasons why we have focused on low and middle income countries. But we also realized, and many of the experts involved did tell us, but this is also important for us. So we hope that's not, while we wanted to focus on low and middle income countries, we think and we hope that this will also be relevant and interesting for the others that are much more advanced. Before I stop and hand over to Jorge, can you please, Jorge, give us the rules? I will also tell you. I think everybody already respecting to cut the micro. Jorge, can you put the slide on the rules? Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, the mute already. Thank you very much for this. That's not the right slide, Jorge, I'm afraid, that I have on screen. Yes, that's perfect. If you can rename yourself within the list, because that would allow us to know whom we have on the participating. For sure, if the note, not of our organizations where we speak about the agenda, but we can interventions usually represent the speaker's ideas. Please don't use this meeting, but I don't think that will be the case from advertising services or company, but I think that's a general rule. The last one is really, we really would like you to listen to what we are presenting and then put the questions in the chat after the panel discussion, because we think that some of them might come up during the presentations, but also some others might have been already answered. So the meeting is recorded. I think you got it already. I got already the advertising about this. And then we hope to have soon a quadripartite antimicrobial resistance website. We'll post the PowerPoints there. And if it takes too much time, I think we will post them in our individual websites in the meantime. I hope I have closed my welcome here. I would like to hand over to Jorge to go directly to our topic, which is the research agenda and the findings that we got from our work. Jorge, over to you.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth, and thank you again for joining to this first webinar to disseminate this One Health Priority Research Agenda. For this presentation, I will share with you the background, the aim, scope, and objective of the research agenda. Methodology, but I will just mention the steps that we take, and my colleague from NOSAL Institute will develop more in details the methodology. I will show you the top 10 priority research areas that we identify in this research agenda, and also the status of the National Action Plans on multi-sectoral actions and the next steps. So this agenda is also founded on the definition of One Health that was developed by the One Health high-level panel in 2021. That is defining that One Health is an integrated and unifying approach that recognize that health of human, animals, plants, and environment are linked and interdependent. And this approach mobilizes sectors, disciplines, and communities to work together and contributing to sustainable development. This is a quadripartite, as Elizabeth mentioned, is a quadripartite organization initiative, and is leading by the Quadripartite Joint Secretariat with the specific activities to support global promotion, advocacy, and political engagement, global governance structures, coordination and monitoring of quadripartite strategic plan, coordination and partnership. To define this agenda, I would like to share that this is part of the Global Action Plan on Integrated Surveillance. It's part of the second strategic objective in this Global Action Plan on AMR. It's also one of part of the recommendation of this report of the Interagency Coordination Group on AMR, and also part of the Quadripartite Strategic Framework for Collaboration on AMR. What is the aim of this research agenda is to catalyze interest among researchers and donors on One Health AMR, provide directions for investment on One Health AMR with focus on low and middle income countries, as Elizabeth also mentioned, and identify and prioritize research areas at the interface between One Health sectors that will inform policy and practice relevant evidence for countries. What is the scope? This was a global exercise. We conducted a global survey. It's focused on the interface between the One Health sectors. We include in this agenda bacteria, parasites, and fungi, and is aligned with the Sustainable Development Goal frame by 2030. Out of the scope in this research agenda is research and development of new antibiotics, antimicrobials, and vaccines, diagnostic development, and research related to only one sector, because each of the sectors is developing their own agenda. Objectives of this research agenda is improve our understanding of transmission of AMR, drivers and impact in the different sectors, and the interface of the sectors, strengthen the evidence base for interventions, advocate for prioritization of AMR, mitigation, and inform policy making. To develop this agenda, we focus on 5 specific pillars: transmission, integrated surveillance, interventions, behavioral insights and change, economics and policy, with cross-cutting themes, gender, vulnerable populations, and sustainability. This is the process. My colleague Alison from Nosal Institute will go more in detail. But basically, to determine the research areas, we conduct a literature review, academic and gray, the global open call survey that I mentioned before, the end expert input. For the prioritization exercise with experts, we use the Delphi method to identify the critical research areas, and the final report was launched in June 2023, this year. To conduct the Delphi method, we ask specifically to the experts to use these 5 questions to rank each of the areas that were identified in the previous exercises. If the area identified was important, is going to strengthen research capacity, is inclusive, impactful, and actionable in low resource settings. 89 top experts from One Health or AMR or scientific pillar relevant to AMR were included, and this was a global representation and gender balance of the experts participating in this prioritization exercise. We identify at the end 62 priority research areas in the 5 pillars. You can see the different numbers here. And I will mention here only the top 10 because we are going to have a specific webinar to work and discuss about each of the areas in each pillar. For transmission, the areas identified here is what is the impact of infection prevention control practices on the development and circulation of AMR in the different sectors. What is the impact of transmission across the sectors with focus on conditions relevant to low and middle income countries. On integrated surveillance, what is the optimum strategies and minimum standards and laboratory capacity to establish and maintain quality integrated AMR surveillance system at scale? And how to integrate the existing AMR, AMU data from the different sectors to allow early identification of development and circulation of AMR across the sectors. On interventions, what is impactful interventions can be translated and scale up in different contexts and differently resources settings. What are the existing challenges to systematic collection and analysis of data for risk assessment and intervention impact assessment in low and middle income countries? Behavioral insights and change. How to identify, characterize, and assessing structural challenges and barriers to AMR behaviors in different socio-cultural contexts, and strategies to adapt behavioral interventions to different contexts. In economics and policies, what is the optimal socio-economic impact assessment in LMICs based on cost-effectively collected data, and government cross-cutting actions for policies, options, and sustainable financing strategies. You can also find infographics of each of the pillars to identify and review the different research areas identified in this agenda. And now we are disseminating this. We are using this as a guiding tool for donors and experts. We are working the 3 levels and the 4 organizations to get donor, expert, scientific community engagement. And also we are working with the interdisciplinary multisectoral research network, including collaborating centers and reference centers, scientific and research community. This is important to mention because we recognize that One Health AMR is a complex topic. You can see that we identify areas to work. There are a lot of things to do and work on each of the areas. But when we see this, the information that we have in the implementation of national action plans, we can see that in the last survey, 159 out of 177 countries have established multisectoral working groups. So this is the target of this, to identify countries to implement and use this research agenda to develop more work on One Health AMR, and also for research and academic institutions to support low and middle income countries. We also would like to share this new initiative that has been established, the AMR Multi-Stakeholder Partnership Platform, because it's an opportunity for researchers and academic institutions. This platform was established by the quadripartite to promote shared vision for AMR, information sharing, networking, and support concrete actions to advance progress on AMR, promotes One Health approach to AMR, multi-stakeholder governance, and private-public partnerships. We have, at this moment, more than 130 members. 5 clusters are included in this platform: governments, UN entities, specialized agencies, global and regional intergovernmental organizations, international regional financial institutions, and philanthropic donors, civil society, academic and research institutions, and private sector entities. The research cluster is among the biggest cluster of the platform, but you can also join. You can find more information in the link that we are going to share with these slides. We have at this moment more than 40 research and academic institutions. action groups has been developed by the members to drive the force of this platform. So we invite you to visit this website and look for to join to this platform. And also to share with you, as Elizabeth mentioned, this is a series of webinars that we are going to conduct. This is the first one, and we are going to have a monthly webinar to discuss more in details of the findings on each of the pillars. So the next one will be in December. You will also receive the invitation. We have for integrated surveillance in January, interventions in February, behavioral insight and change in March, and policy and economics in April. You can also contact us if you have or you need more information about these events or the research agenda. Thank you very much, and thank you also the International Center for Antimicrobial Resistance Solution that gave us the financial support to develop this agenda. Thank you, and over to you, Elizabeth.
Thank you very much, Jorge. I think we are in the first part, and maybe we just go directly to Nossel, because we will have the panel discussions, but we do have questions and answers sessions, so we should have time. Maybe you can spare these questions, what I told, and then write them down in the chat after the presentations and the panel discussion. So I think Nossel will be the next one. Alison, is you presenting? We didn't present, maybe you present yourself in the beginning.
Sure. Good morning, good afternoon, and for those of you in the East Asia Pacific region like me, good evening. I'm Alison McIntyre from the Nossel Institute for Global Health at the University of Melbourne, and I will be alongside my colleague Gillian presenting the approach and methodology that we use to arrive at the Priority One Health AMR research agenda. Firstly, it's important to note that there was really a team of researchers that contributed to the development of this research agenda with the quadripartite.
Sorry to interrupt, but we you do have in presentation mode, but we see the all your screen.
Just yeah.
Is that better?
Now is yeah.
Yes.
Great.
Now it's better.
Sorry about that. So just to say that it was really a team of researchers that contributed to the development of this research agenda alongside the quadripartite. And so I and Gillian led the team, and we had technical oversight from Associate Professor Angus Campbell, who's a One Health research specialist. We had two qualitative research specialists, Dr. Daniel Strawn and Dr. Shazra Abbas, who really contributed to the analysis of the global survey data. We had Dr. Lindsay Gale, who's a Delphi expert, supporting and really leading that work around the Delphi process, and Dr. Melanie Barrister-Terrell, who also contributed as a One Health specialist in some of the quantitative analysis of the Delphi data. Given the multidisciplinary nature of the work, we thought it was also important to appoint an advisory board to this project. And they were made up of leading experts across Australia in One Health AMR that covered a breadth of sectors. So people who were animal health specialists, human health specialists, as well as environment specialists. And they periodically contributed to provide technical oversight and strategic direction to the development of the research agenda. So just to go back to what Jorge introduced, the research agenda was really shaped by these 5 pillars and 3 cross-cutting themes. And this emerged from an agenda scoping consultation that was led by the quadripartite back in early 2021. And the reason that I raise this is this really provided the framework for both the design and the analysis of each of the components that I'll describe later that were used to develop the research agenda. So it's important to keep that in mind, that they were really formative in the way that this work was designed and analysed. As was also shared, there were multiple data sources that contributed to the identification of research gaps, and these were consolidated through multiple rounds and then presented to a Delphi panel. This was conducted over about a 2-year period. And it's important to note that there were key exclusion criteria applied to the identification of the research gaps. And that was really to align with the One Health interface focus of the research agenda and the global focus. So that was not including anything or research gaps that focused on a single country, pathogen, sector, or disease. Anything that was a gap but was more implementation focused, like capacity or training needs, were also excluded. Anything that was product development or diagnostics, and anything dated 2014 or earlier, particularly for the literature reviews. And this was to acknowledge there'd been huge expansion of One Health and AMR research after the launch of the Global Action Plan for AMR. And all of this was conducted in English, so anything outside English language was excluded. Okay, so a little bit more detail on the literature reviews. 2 literature review processes were conducted by different groups. So firstly, the academic literature review, which was conducted by Bultiel and colleagues, built from a scoping review that they conducted in 2021 and then updated at the end of December 2021 to capture any new research gaps that emerged. It's important to acknowledge that neither of the literature reviews adopted sort of a traditional systematic approach. And this was because we were trying to identify a breadth of research gaps, and because of the multidisciplinary nature, but also the different pillars and research expertise that we were trying to harvest research gaps for, we adopted both a scoping review process and a targeted search process to identify a breadth of research gaps. For the academic literature review, 4 databases were searched using the key terms on the screen. And then these gaps were identified and they were coded into like sector-specific areas, such as those focused on animal health, human health, but there was also a group that were coded as interface. And these were research gaps from the academic literature that focused across more than 2 One Health sectors and were really focused on that interface. And it was these gaps coded as interface that were brought forward for further consolidation. For the Grey Literature Review, this was conducted largely in 2022, and an iterative research approach was used to identify those gaps. These were then consolidated, and overall from both literature reviews, 455 research gaps were put forward to further analysis and consolidation. The second major data source used to harvest research gaps was an open call global survey that was led by the Quadripartite in August 2021. And this was open to the public, but was really targeted at One Health AMR experts. And they were asked to identify 3 research gap suggestions across each of the 5 pillars, as well as the cross-cutting themes. And where they had additional suggestions, these were also welcome. Out of those, over 1,500 entered the survey, about 290 registered and posed at least some data, and about 200 respondents proposed at least 1 question. So there was quite a lot of variability in the number of questions that were posed by each of the respondents, and this depended somewhat on their area of expertise. Out of all of that, over 2,000 research gaps were proposed, so this required further analysis. That raw data was then exported into NVivo and cleaned, and it was coded by pillar and cross-cutting themes. And this was the same approach that was taken for the literature review, where the first set of coding introduced these research gaps into each of the pillars and the cross-cutting areas. An iterative, inductive and deductive thematic analysis was conducted by 2 researchers at NOSLs. And out of these, themes were developed and exemplar questions were put forward for each theme. And it's important to note that research gaps that were identified in the literature review were more framed as sentences or statements, and that those that emerged from the global survey were really framed as research questions. And so the exemplar questions were either directly quoted from one that was posed through the survey that really captured the breadth of the specific theme it represented and was well worded and a clear research questions. Sometimes they needed to be adapted and blended to form a coherent question to put forward to further analysis. Then all these data sources were brought together, and please do bear with me while I talk through multiple consolidation phases. But we had over 2,000 gaps that were consolidated into a set of exemplar questions from the survey analysis, and we had 455 gaps from the literature reviews. So for the literature reviews, further consolidation was conducted. They were merged and they were coded iteratively for current themes, again by 2 researchers. And then out of that, a consolidated form of research gaps were from the literature that were then analysed together with the exemplar questions from the survey data. And there are at least 3 rounds of analysis and reflection from a team at NOSL to consolidate those research gaps, again, perform a thematic analysis to arrive at a final list of research gaps from all the data sources. It's important to know that no weighting was applied. So even if there was only one suggestion for a research gap or exemplar question, this was weighted evenly with those that might have had multiple suggestions around a similar question. It's important to also highlight that the final set of research gaps, among the transmission and the surveillance pillars, there was more, I guess, coherence around the suggestions that were put forward. And this might indicate that those research areas are further along in terms of the research, as opposed to the other pillars where there was greater diversity and less coherence between the final research gaps. And from these then went through a final process of quadripartite review where technical experts made some modifications and edits so that there were clear, coherent language across all the research gaps and that they were technically aligned. Now I'll pass to my colleague, Gillian, who will talk further about the Delphi process. Over to you, Jill.
Cheers, Alison, and hello to everybody. And I apologise, the light on my screen the sun is shining directly on me, so it's slightly dark. So as you can see, our approach was to go wide, to cast a more comprehensive net for the gaps that were available and to funnel them down into a research agenda. And the second last stage of that was this Delphi panel, also called the Delphi process. And that is used in order to obtain a consensus now on the consolidated gaps that we've obtained from the previous stages of this research, of this work. As Jorge mentioned, the quadripartite did invite a significant number of experts into this process, and 146 experts in One Health and/or AMR, gender, vulnerability, and sustainability were invited to participate. Now, we did obtain ethics clearance from the University of Melbourne Ethics Committee for this work, and 113 global experts agreed to participate and signed those forms, but actually 98 finally participated. Those experts were balanced for genders, so it was an equal balance of men and women, but we do acknowledge that there was a majority who were based in high income settings as opposed to lower income settings. So before the Delphi actually kicked off last year, Delphi ran from May to August, we did hold a pre-Delphi webinar. And that was in order to explain how we'd come to the research gaps, the process that Alison has just set out, and how the Delphi would run so that experts would know how to participate. The Delphi was run over 3 rounds, and experts were asked to make a score or to rate the research gaps that we've consolidated against 5 criteria. And I just want to go back over these. Jorge has already mentioned them, but I want to just reiterate. The first one was important, and this criteria was only applied in the first round. And we used it in order to validate the results from our interim results from the survey and the literature review. And the way it worked is that experts were asked to agree or disagree that this research gap is important to fill, or this research is important to conduct. And they would have answered that question against all research gaps in their pillar for that criteria of important. And then they would have moved on to all the research gaps again against the criteria of research capacity strengthening, meaning that if this research had been conducted, it would have an ability to strengthen research capacity in the lower middle income settings. And this was repeated for all 5 criteria. So we really do want to acknowledge and to express gratitude for the significant work that was undertaken by experts in this agenda setting work. Can we go to the next slide, Alison? So as I said, the Delphi was conducted over 3 rounds, and the experts were asked to either disagree or give no response to each criteria. So that meant they could say yes, I agree that this gap is important or not important, or they could say it's neither important or not important, or they could give no response at all. So there was an ability to give no responses. Experts could skip and give no answer whatsoever. So for the first round, we had 5 criteria, and that included important. And another thing that happened in the first round that did not happen in other rounds is that experts were invited to give 2 additional gaps that they thought were important research gaps that should be filled or could be filled, but had not surfaced in the earlier work of the survey and the literature review. And all of this information was brought into analysis to reduce the total number of research gaps that had, so by way of consensus. So remember, the Delphi is all about consensus, about obtaining consensus onto where we should be putting our resources to develop research for the future. So in analysis, what we did is we created a score for each research gap. So that means we gave a number 1 and a 1 to a yes, a 0 to a no, and a 0.5 to a middle response or to a no response. So this means that we could actually create a number for each gap across all criteria and per pillar. Then what we did is because we had a number, we could create a mean, and then we calculated the standard deviation away from the mean. And this allowed us then to rank the research gaps per standard deviation, from the shortest or smallest standard deviation to the largest. So as you can see, we're using standard deviation as a proxy for consensus. So we're looking for the gaps that had the greatest consensus for that criteria and in their own pillar. And this allowed us then to cut off or to eliminate the gaps that had the least consensus. And so the gaps that had the greater consensus were brought into round 2. And the same process then happened again. The difference for round 2 is that the criterion of important was dropped because it had already been established in round 1. The results were then analysed in the same way and then were brought into round 3. So by round 3, there was around 15 research gaps left in this funneling process, apart from surveillance, which had 14. And in round 3, the experts were asked to do slightly different tasks. They were asked to create a top 10. So it's like, from these 15 gaps, which are in your top 10, which 10 are in your top 10, and which are not. So it was an in-out. Here's the top 10 basket. You put your gaps in the top 10 basket, and here's the other basket. They're not in the top 10. So this gave us basically a top 10 per pillar, per criteria, and then per pillar, which were then amalgamated to come across for a top 10 per pillar. Then these results were fed back to the experts through the Qualtrics platform and through a webinar per pillar that was organised by the OHPRA in October last year and led us to the report that you now see today. Okay, I'm aware about time, Jorge, so I'll just hand back to you.
Thank you very much. I think, Gillian, I thank you for having make the last closing a bit quicker, because just start to be a bit over time. But it's true, it's always difficult. We would like to please have, if you have specific questions for Nossel and what they just explained, the details of the method, please also keep them for the end in the chat, and then we'll direct them to Nossel directly. Now I would like to hand over to Francesca, because she's going to moderate the panel session. I hope that will be interesting, and we thank in advance our panelists here. Over to you, Francesca.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. And I would like to invite the panelists also to open their cameras, so then we can also start. So we go now to the part in which, we want to hear from people that they have different roles that, they can provide us some more information on what is going on, but also like how this can be, has been also some example on activity which are on One Health research. So I would like to invite Dr. Leslie Ogilvie, which is the director of the Secretariat at the Global AMR Research and Agenda Hub. I cannot see.
Hi there.
Okay, yes. Prior to joining the hub, Leslie worked as a researcher at academic institutions in the UK and Germany, including the Max Planck Institute, to understand the role of the human gut biome in health and the discovery of therapeutic phage. So thank you for accepting to be here. Then we have Dr. Sujit Chandri, which is the Executive Director at the International Center for Antimicrobial Resistance Solutions, also known as ICARS in Denmark. And prior to this role, he was the senior professor at the Department of Pharmacology and Clinical Pharmacology at Christian Medical College in India, and also the director of REACT Asia Pacific. We also have Dr. Pilar Donado Godoy, which is the senior researcher of Colombian Corporation of Agricultural Research, AgroSavia, the founder also of the Colombian Program for Integrated Surveillance of AMR, OHPRA, and since 2018, she has led the Global Health Research Unit on genomic AMR surveillance in Colombia, with the support of an international consortium for pathogen surveillance. And last but not least, we also have Dr. Toby Leslie, which is an infectious disease epidemiologist with a background in research and One Health in low and middle income countries. He has been, since 2016, the global technical lead for the Fleming Fund Management Agent at Mott MacDonald. So thank you all for accepting the invitation, and we are looking forward also to have your point of view. So we start with a round of questions. So the first one, we start with Leslie. So for the hub, so we know that the AMR is a complex phenomenon that needs to be addressed within and across the sector. So do we know how much funding is actually dedicated on One Health research? Over to you, Leslie.
Thank you, Francesca. So first of all, I'd just like to say thank you very much for the invitation to be part of this webinar, and congratulations to the quadripartite on the publication of this very excellent research agenda. It's a great foundation. So maybe to start off with, I can give you a little bit of background on the Global AMR R&D Hub, just for context. So we are a partnership of countries, non-governmental donor organizations and intergovernmental organizations. And we were established to actually help address challenges and improve coordination and collaboration in global AMR R&D, and with a One Health lens. So our main aim is actually to provide evidence that helps guide decision making on the use of those. We know they're very limited resources that we have for AMR R&D. And so as part of that goal, we've developed an online platform called the Dynamic Dashboard, and this allows us to collect and display information on what has been invested by public and philanthropic sources globally into AMR R&D since 2017. So we've been working on this for a few years now, and have managed to collect information on over 14,300 projects worth close to $12 billion US, and these span all One Health sectors. So if we look at all of these One Health sectors on an individual basis, we can see that funding for human health dominates the landscape, the funding landscape. So we have around 84% of all the funding in our dashboard flowing to the sector. We have around 6% going to animal health and 1% for environmental and plant health, respectively. But because we've got all those One Health sectors in our dashboard, we can also look at the funding flowing into projects that involve more than one Health sector. So we call them cross-sectoral projects. And so this equates to around 6% of the current funding displayed within our dashboard. So that equates to around $680 million US. But if we dig a bit deeper and look at the projects that involve all 4 One Health sectors, then there's a lot less funding for this. So around $62 million US since 2017. So in terms of what type of cross-sectoral research is being funded at the moment, we are seeing close to half of the funding being allocated to so-called operational projects. So these are the ones that aid in decision-making and management strategies. And for us, this is quite a broad-reaching term, and it covers topics such as IPC, stewardship, surveillance, improving access to tools, social sciences, and also economics. So cutting across all of those pillars that you're mentioning in your report. Just over a quarter is for capacity building research, so improving the human or infrastructural resource capacity to address AMR, and approximately 13% is for basic research. What's quite encouraging, though, is that we are seeing a year-on-year increase in funding for cross-sectoral projects since 2017. So if we compare the amount that went into funding for cross-sectoral research in 2017 and with the amount for 2020, we actually see that it's almost, well, more than doubled the amount of funding. So it's 63 million in 2017 and 140 million US dollars in 2020. Yeah, so that's like kind of an overview, and we've also done a bit of a review with Maastricht University, and that also shows that the number of publications has increased in the One Health sphere over this time, so between 2017 and 2021. But what we're finding is most publications are covering the operational focus area, not surprisingly, with surveillance and transmission topics being highlighted. But we also notice there's a lack of publications within an environmental dimension. So I think I'll stop there, and yeah, if there's any questions, please ask.
Yes, just like, yeah, we have asked like the people to put the question in the chat as soon as we finish also with the panel, so I think that we can concentrate. But thank you very much for giving this overview, and it's quite interesting to see that we do have this information, and I think that also very nice to understand that there is an increase, although we have not maybe reached the level that we would like to have. And now we go to the question instead for Dr. Suji. So for you, instead for the ICARS, how could government incentivize and implement One Health research that will support the operationalization of One Health National Action Plan for AMR? Over to you.
Thank you very much. And thank you for this question. And thank you also for the privilege to speak on behalf of my ICARS colleagues at the International Center for Antimicrobial Resistance Solutions. I'd also like to thank the entire UN quadripartite group for the opportunity for ICARS to support this important initiative and exercise. And one may ask, why did we support this venture? Well, that goes down to the ICARS vision and mission, where we would like a world which is free from antimicrobial resistance. But in order to do that, how do we proceed? And very much the ecosystem, the human health, the One Health issues come, the environmental issues come into this picture, because it is truly a One Health problem. And therefore, what we do and how we work in ICARS is often bottoms up with the community and research institutions and top down with governments. We need that public and government buy-in and stakeholder buy-in if we really want to move forward with AMR in the One Health arena. And the way we work is we currently, for example, have 32 projects in 16 countries across a One Health spectrum. But we make sure that we identify the government and country needs and their priorities, what are their gaps, and then try and generate that evidence which is needed in order to fulfill a model or intervention through implementation research, which can then be sustainable, cost-effective, and most importantly, lead to behavior change. I think the world needs such a research agenda in One Health, and it needs to be prioritized. And therefore, this fantastic document and this initiative by the UN quadripartite agencies is a welcome initiative, but also well-timed, I must say. I think we need to move forward now. As regards to your question, often we are searching in the dark. Many people outside the AMR world just do not know what AMR is. Even within the AMR world and among policymakers, where do we start? Where do we invest? There are a multitude of issues within and outside AMR. And I think this framework gives a guidance, a focus, and a direction. And now it's up to the countries to when they understand their needs, prioritize, and then move forward, I think this framework will help in this exercise. I think what will happen now is that the countries, if they do this prioritizing exercise within the sectors, looking at the need, potential for behavior change and cost effectiveness, and making sure that these will have sustainability and scale up, what will come out of that will probably be model projects which can bring out the context-specific cost-effective solutions. And these models can then be incentivized with scale up because there will be government buy-in. And I think in that respect, once we look at the 5 areas and the 5 pillars, whether it's economics, whether it's behavioral change, whether it is the implementation and intervention, the integrated surveillance, and of course, the transmission, all would relate to each other. And once we build up this evidence basis into this framework, then we don't need to keep spinning the wheel. We can learn from each other. And it is our hope at ICAS, and I'm sure at the UN, that this research agenda would be a kick, a spark, a fire in moving forward and addressing AMR through One Health. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and indeed, we really hope so. And then, well, it's important that I think that we always start with research when it comes to address question. And yeah, very important also that you highlight that for the behavioral science, because I think that this is the first agenda that, I mean, has been brought, like also this a specific topic, which we have actually learned, like also from the pandemic, that is very important. Now we go to Dr. Pilar Donado. So for you instead, we want to have a bit more information about how it is going at national level for the implementation. So we know that Colombia has developed One Health AMR research activities, and what are the main barriers and weaknesses to sustaining research to address AMR at One Health interfaces at the national and regional levels? Over to you, Pilar.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for this invitation, and good morning for all of you. So over the last 15 years, our team have developed various One Health AMR research activities, which include COIPARS, that is a pilot of One Health integrated system of antimicrobial resistance surveillance that began with capital C and support of the WHO. We did investigation to scientifically support the law on limitation of colistin use. We built whole genome sequencing capacity that allowed us to do outbreak investigations. We did WGS support for investigations in AMR surveillance for different official institutions, as the Colombian National Institute of Health, the Colombian USDA, ICA, and hospitals. And we did a One Health pilot investigation of an AMR hotspot in Colombia based on Streptococcus group B. For the last 2 years, we have been working in a bottom-up initiative to build a national agenda for investigation and innovation on AMR and CRAM, with the constitution of a network of 27 research teams working on AMR in Colombia. On the basis of this AMR research experience, here are the 5 main barriers and weaknesses to sustain research to address AMR at the One Health interfaces that we have identified. First, we need to recognize that the risk factors of AMR are specific to local conditions. Therefore, while there are global partners for research on AMR, it is very important to customize the research efforts to local conditions. Fighting AMR in Colombia is quite different than fighting AMR in Europe or in the US. For example, we have almost 20% of the population living in the countryside in contact with animals in Colombia, while it is only 1 to 3% in Europe or in the US. We have informal economy that represents more than 50% of the GDP. We have great disparity in the public health system, meaning that a significant number of infections are not properly diagnosed, and so on. We need a local customization of the One Health AMR research program. The second point of barrier is that we have an issue of methodology. Most of our research projects in AMR are of analytical nature, focusing on quite specific and limited problems without a clear ex-ante impact assessment on the reduction of AMR in the country. There are very few projects that embrace a systemic approach, and even less or none that are using the promising contribution of the theory of complexity. Therefore, it is almost impossible to establish priorities within the national portfolio of research, and consequently to focus our resources on the most promising interventions to curb the AMR development in Colombia. The third is that there is a limited transdisciplinary approach because the research teams are not used to work across boundaries. As a result of the 10 highest priority research areas defined by the quadripartite organization, we consider that no more than 3 have some kind of research activities in Colombia. They are integrated surveillance, transmission, and economy and policy. The 4 is the limited amount of funds that are available for research on One Health. What we have here is that is related to the fact that there is no prioritization nor evaluation of the impact of the research. It is a kind of vicious circle impeding the attraction of resource investment. And the 5th, as a consequence of the 4, there is a limited number of research groups working in AMR in the country. We have identified around 40 groups in Colombia, a country of 50 million population, while there are more than 500 identified in France, that is a country of 70 million people. And I stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pilar. And indeed, I think that this is also really like our hope that in a way also this exercise that was done at global level to prioritize, give also like a possibility to help to prioritize at national level. And yes, indeed, well, we also hope that this is a tool that, researchers can use to advocate when they ask for project, like for the funds. Now we go to our last panelist, so which is Toby. So Toby, for you instead, we have a question which is more based on the experience in supporting the implementation of One Health AMR national and international activities. How do you consider the contribution of these research agenda to address enough gaps and improve capacities in low and middle income countries? Over to you. I'm looking forward to hearing.
Great, thank you, Francesca. And in the interest of time, I'll try and be as brief as possible. So thanks, obviously, to the quadripartite for this initiative. It's a really important one, and it's, I think, essential to the cause to have some unifying force that's brought forward by the quadripartite to demonstrate One Health leadership. Where One Health is most effective is generally, at least in my experience, is at the ground level, and bringing people together from different sectors to learn from each other and understand what the common priorities are. The Fleming Fund, as I think most people will know, supports the development of surveillance for antimicrobial resistance at the national level, and in doing so, we support part of National Action Plan implementation. One of the 5 pillars of National Action Plans involves research and surveillance. So the research and surveillance is often grouped together, but surveillance is not research, and research is not necessarily surveillance. So we have to understand the shortcomings of surveillance data as it's collected from national systems, and understand the fact that surveillance data is not necessarily epidemiologically robust. And you'll recall that my background is as an epidemiologist. And surveillance is, of course, extremely useful, in fact, essential to help set priorities. But research is also essential to provide a methodologically robust set of understanding around the problem. So I think this is a really important initiative to help buttress surveillance systems and support, catalyze work and action. What surveillance systems generally do is identify policy problems for policymakers. It doesn't necessarily make us the most popular people, when actually what policymakers want is policy solutions. And that's where the research sphere comes in. So to provide locally derived data that's based around local priorities and provides strong evidence on what works and what doesn't work, and particularly with regard to the economics and the social science aspects, as well as the biological nature of antimicrobial resistance. But it's the social sciences and the economics that will actually address the problem and the changes in behavior that are required. And it's really important to have good, robust data and information to support decision making. So I think that's where the crossover between surveillance and this research initiative stands. But we should also make sure that we are making use of One Health where One Health approach is useful, and acknowledge that not all AMR is a One Health issue, that a lot of it is, but also not all of AMR is One Health, and not all of One Health is AMR. So we need to be careful in setting where we sit in that, so that we don't distract important research and surveillance that might take place in one of the One Health sectors, and distract that into a more of an integrated approach where it's not necessarily appropriate. And of course, there's the center of the circle, which is the truly integrated piece of research, and that is scientifically very challenging and also quite artistic in bringing together all of the different sectors. And lastly, I'll say that, of course, One Health relies on collaboration, and I think many of you will know the Fleming Fund has been working with its fellowship program to create collaborations between individuals from different sectors across the One Health disciplines, but also to bring collaboration between academic partners and public sector surveillance. And we think that this has been a really successful part of the program, of which we're really, really proud. But it does demonstrate the overlap between what we can do in strengthening surveillance systems and bringing in research and policy analysis as well. So I'll stop there with those few comments.
Thank you very much, Toby. And well, indeed, I mean, the One Health does not stop also to advance in the different sector, but it's very important that when we think of solutions, since that they impact all of us, I mean, the different sector, we also communicate, and we try to do the work together as much as possible. So now I want to, because thank you very much for all your intervention. Now we open the possibility to write the question in the chat. And then Jorge, is there anyone that is already there? So over to you. Otherwise, I can proceed with an additional question to the panelists.
No, Francesca, we don't have question at this moment. Maybe we can continue with the other question for the panelists. Or we can wait for 1 minute to see some questions.
Okay, maybe I will start with and then let's see, just tell me when there are some questions coming, because time is precious, so we go ahead with the one. So this is the same for all of you, what do you suggest could be the next step to implement this One Health research priority agenda? So I did not know, Leslie, first, we go in the same order.
Thanks, Francesca. I think that's the really crucial point, isn't it? We've got this agenda. How do we actually operationalize this? And I think this is the key question. I think exchanges between funders and decision makers will be key for this, and exchanges across different ministries and different departments to see what works, get different perspectives joining together. And as part of this, we just had our annual meeting last month already. And we decided to establish a One Health working group where our members can actually talk about these issues, One Health issues. How can we actually exchange across ministries and departments, and exchange on what works, what doesn't, different perspectives, how do we actually operationalize One Health? And we see your priority research agenda being a real fantastic foundation to stimulate those discussions and find out how we can support in some way to further implement the findings. So from our side, that's what we hope we can do, and support this process in any way we can.
Thank you very much. And then, yeah, looking forward to see the group operating. So Sujit, over to you.
Thank you. To me, I think this is an opportunity for every country, especially for lower middle income countries, to re-examine themselves and identify where the gaps are within sectors. So I think what should happen is everyone first step would be to familiarize themselves with the optics and the entire summary of this agenda and understand how this research agenda works, and use that effectively by having small group conversations within sectors first, trying to identify where their needs are the most in alignment with this research agenda, and then try and bring it together between sectors and have a meeting where the policymakers come together and then do a prioritization exercise, looking at impact factors, maybe sustainability issues, cost effectiveness especially, and then with that prioritization, bring in small models through implementation and intervention research. With those models would then come the issue of sustainability and scale up. And if we use that in a systematic way, I think this will become much more popular and usable, and most importantly, fruitful. This entire efforts that everybody is put in would then become a natural way to do things. And I think that is the thing, to change the culture through this prioritization research agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Sujit. And now Pilar.
Okay, so for us, we have two steps. The first one is, as I said, we have been working for 2 years. So it's to consolidate the agenda that is going to be launched in December. So we have experts in the part of complexity. And so we want to tailor the priorities for the country based on a systemic approach. We did in the past, this recent past last year, a hotspot that was a way to prove that we can work in interaction of all the sectors and with transdisciplinary approach. The second one is that we are doing a project to work AMR dynamics of in Medellin, that is a city in Colombia that has many factors, many risk factors for AMR development. So in this, again, we are working in a One Health focus. We have human, animal, and also we have environment part. So we, again, with these experts, are going to develop this project. We are working with 6 bacteria, and we are going to develop that to see if it works, how the complexity is going to help us, because it's an experience that we haven't seen in other parts of the world. So it's something that we are beginning right now, and we will tell you soon what are the results. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And then we go to Toby. Over to you for the last insight.
Thank you very much. I think, with all of these initiatives, underlying it all is political will and funding, and seeing the importance of operational research not as a nice to have and not as a cost, but really as an investment in understanding a very complex ecosystem that works, as we all, we're all aware. But even to the experts, it's a highly complex eco-epidemiological set of problems that we're trying to address. Now, unless there's and this initiative is part of the leadership that's required at a global level to lead the big institutional donors, individual countries, academic partners, and academic donors into providing better funding for this type of work. Now, having spent 6-7 years implementing the Fleming Fund, I see no shortage anywhere in the world of willingness to participate, of enthusiasm. What I do see is shortage of resources and shortage of opportunities, particularly for those in LMICs, to interact at the sharp edge of technology and to realize the power of that technology. And for all of that, we really need funding. And we look at some of the big institutional donors who I won't name specifically, but we do see some of those big institutional donors operating around disease-specific issues that have acknowledged and for years have funded a decent amount of operational research as part of their general business order of doing business, and they have genuinely moved the science along in the realm of vaccine development, in the realm of control methods for various diseases. I'm trying to be non-specific here so they don't give too much of a clue about who I'm talking about. But the fact is that the value of that investment by these institutional donors has been realized, and it has paid off, and it's paid big dividends in terms of disease control. So if we can convince international donors, governments themselves to invest in this topic, we should expect that those dividends should be paid back. So I think that's one of the major issues. There's no shortage of goodwill, there's no shortage of technical expertise to help drive the agenda, but what there is a shortage of resources to be able to deliver on this and make it be seen as a political and research investment rather than as a cost or a nice to have, but it really is an essential component of addressing this global problem.
Yes, thanks. And then maybe, I mean, if you have seen, for the audience, if you have seen the document itself, but also the infographic, the research priority area have been also divided in which kind of research it is needed, like if it is implementation research or like if it is to understand the drivers. And I think that, yeah, indeed, I mean, yes, there is a need of the funding, and then, but we will try also, let's say that we will continue with this, webinars also, like to, well, nudge also for funders to bring together like also the money and then also like the researcher. So now there are some questions in the chat. So Jorge, can you, handing over to you, like if you want to read them loud and then.
Thank you. Yes, we have some question on, the question is there some specific tailored process methodology to translate the AMR data, evidence, knowledge emerging from this research agenda into effective policies? Key will be knowledge synthesis. He mentioned the work on Fleming Fund radar project and also the tracks that over the years have shown these capacities weak in low and middle income countries. So from this, I think that one of the activities that we are now discussing is how to establish a mechanism, quadripartite mechanism, to monitor the activities of this One Health research agenda and bring these activities implementing this research agenda to also bring to the high level, because you know that the quadripartite is also working a lot on the politics side to bring more attention by the governments to address more effectively AMR actions. So this is one of the actions that we are going to take as part of this, how we are going to address the research agenda. And yeah, this is related with this question. The other two questions quickly is asking about the integrated surveillance. One of the question is regarding the use of other approaches as the ESBL tricycle protocol that was developed. And this is one of the models of One Health's integrated surveillance system. And also the other question is about
the purpose of the surveillance in general.
The purpose, yes. So let me share that the quadripartite organization established the quadripartite technical group on integrated surveillance. They are now developing the new guidance, the One Health integrated surveillance guidance, and the purpose have been defined there. And this, and also they are taking this approach of the tricycle protocol to see what is the opportunity to enhance these models, and also to be more strategic, but also how to improve and be clear about the purpose and help the low resources settings to establish this integrated surveillance from the basics to the most complex, because here the experience that we have on integrated surveillance are coming from high-income countries, but the examples are only focused on the food chain. So now when we try to implement the One Health aspects as plants, environment, this is more complex. So this guidance is ongoing, it's going to be developed, and is considering new purposes, but also the models that at this moment we have from high-income countries, but also based on this tricycle protocol. Over. Let me see if we have more questions.
There is one which is actually very interesting, and it is regarding people would like to hear the comment on it is the on the human-centered approach to antimicrobial resistance and One Health approach, and how they can both work in parallel, like the different sectors. So if someone from the panel want to.
Okay, can I answer in my experience?
Sure.
Okay, so we have two experiences now with the human sector. The first one was a hotspot of emergency of Streptococcus agalactiae, and we work with the human sector. The first thing is that they didn't know what else could cause this Streptococcus in animals, that was mastitis, and in aquaculture. So they get to know that was the first time, and they were very eager to collaborate, to send samples to take and analyze, and because we have the whole genome sequencing, was very easy to integrate all this information, and we presented the project, the results together. And in the new project that we have in Medellin, more than working in parallel, we have the human sector involved since the beginning. In all the development of the project, we met, because we had the project already done, every week. We discuss all the parts, how we are going to interact, et cetera, in the bacteria, as Klebsiella, for example, what they found. And now it's very easy to work. And now they understand this interface, at least in our experience in Colombia. Thank you. Is that?
Thank you. Yes, Sujit, if you want to add. You are on mute.
Yeah, just on one more aspect on this. I think there are a few ways of looking at this when you compare the person-centered approach and this whole OHPRA. One is, of course, that within each sector, there has to be a focus in the human health. Of course, it is the person, the people. And therefore, in each sector and in each dimension, that focus needs to be there. So that in one way is more of a vertical structure there, or a vertical focus. But the One Health research agenda gives that horizontal framework within to be able to integrate, as well as to make sure that the whole ecosystem moves in a forward direction. The second aspect here is that there are places where there are interfaces between the sectors. And that is where the One Health framework would then kick in much more than a very sector-based approach. And the last is that there are always cross-cutting themes. For example, it could be gender, it could be environmental issues beyond, and many things which are economics-based, in case for investment. That again means that we cannot move just through the sectors, but also have to look at the whole country needs, or all the sectoral needs. And that's where this One Health approach would be very crucial. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And now I'm sorry, but we do not have time to answer the other questions, which now I see are coming. So I would like to hand over to Elizabeth. So thank you very much to all the panelists for joining and to give the insight. I see also in the chat that they have started discussion on the integrated surveillance, and I mean we are looking forward also to have the specific webinar on this, which it seems that it is a very hot topic. But of course we will also have the other 5. So Elizabeth, over to you for the closing remarks.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think So she just gave one keyword that I wanted to mention, because we are very much aware we have taken a global approach. We had experts from ground, from very different countries in very different regions, but for sure that will not represent all the parts of the world and all the needs of individual countries that will have to adapt their agenda to their own needs. So I wanted to take another point on this that came up. Research needs time, and that's something that we tend to forget a bit, because we will not have an answer immediately, and that's what we very often look for, and that's why we start what I told in the very beginning, the best guess approach. So we need to start to build the answers. I think that's very much what the agenda tries to do, and we need to do it on. This agenda is focusing, as Howard mentioned many times, on the interface and on the One Health part. So I think this is quite new, quite young science compared to the others. So we are all learning together, but we also really count on you. Many of you that are here are really researchers, so we count on you to help us and also to spread or to interact with us after the meeting, because there might be more specific questions. But please don't forget that we have the other webinars to come very soon. I wanted to thank, this is a teamwork, not only with the experts, but also within our organization. All of the 4 organizations have worked with many people in the organizations behind. We are just the spokespersons and the ones that try to drive the process, and that are probably the most enthusiastic about this, because it's quite an interesting learning process. I also want to thank the panelists and the experts that are not all of them are here, because otherwise we should have 200 people. So we hope that this is really the fruit of a teamwork, a broad teamwork, not only between sectors, but also between the pillars and between different countries, different situations. That's what it makes challenging, but also probably as interesting as it is. And before we close, we would try to take a picture. For sure, it's not as nice as being together, but if you could, for maybe some minutes, try to put your picture on screen. So we'll try to do this. It's usually not the best we can do, but it's the best we can do in this with this Zoom meetings. Try to do this.
Yes, so if you can smile, I can take the screenshot. So, and then I need to take for 4 different, so we are quite many.
Okay, then we need to smile for quite some time. Okay, Francesca, you tell us when we can stop smiling. Will you tell us when you're through?
Yes, I'm at the last shot now.
Okay.
Yes, done.
Okay, so thank you very much, because we wanted to. So we hope that we could interest you. Again, it's only 1.5 hours. We count on you on the next dates, please. Transmission, the 6th of December, integrated surveillance, the 10th of January, interventions, 7th of February, behavioral insight and change. This is something that will be really interesting. I think it's really new, intersectoral. This part is the 6th March 24, and policy economics, the driver of everything, the money behind. Also for our agenda is the 7th of April. These are tentative dates. There might be some changes, but we will make sure that we keep you informed. And for sure, there was some question about the links. We have other quadripartite undertakings, projects ongoing. So for sure, we'll try to link this. But I think Roche mentioned that we had an official launch that was more political, basically takeoff. But now we wanted to see the technical part and how we can go on the technical side. I think that's all, because we have, I think we should close very soon. Again, thanks also to the participants. Bon appetit for the ones that have lunchtime. Good night for the ones that go to sleep. and good luck for the ones who are in the morning and they will start working. And with this, I think I wish we could close. Jorge, Francesca, if you agree, I think that's from my side, our closing and thanks part. That is really important because we can only succeed if we work together and exchange and learn from each other. So we hope that we see all of you next time for the transmission part. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks and goodbye.
Thank you all.
Thank you.